Oh, this is not going well.
Well, you have to let me say something. Hello.
I know. That's why I redid it, so I wouldn't interrupt you.
Oh.
No.
Take 4.
Okay. Okay, we're on take 4. We just can't seem to get this darn video opened up because we keep horsing around with each other. But, this is Betsy and Thomas, the American intelligence media, Tyla and Douglas Gabriel, with our good friend and amazing researcher, Michael McKibben. How was that? Was that better, guys?
Beautiful.
Yes, that's good. Good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, right now, let's just dive in. The thumbnail says we call this lies, propaganda, snakes, and shills. And, in the end, that's all they really have. They're snake stories, they're lies, they're propaganda. They twist the truth, they distract you. They want you to stay away from who's really running this genocide operation. And the first one that we're going to talk about today is Dr. Ardis being on all of the shows within a 24-hour period to give his great new narrative that COVID comes from snake venom.
Yes, the second that he started speaking, I was so amazed because I thought, who filmed this? This isn't a normal interview. This is done by somebody who's really trying to use perception management and persuade me. And so I started, I wasn't really paying attention to the content of what he was saying because some of what he was saying was true, but most of what he was saying was the worst science ever spoken out of someone's mouth. That you can take king cobra snake venom, put it in the public water systems of the entire world, and then create basically the symptoms that we would call the symptoms of COVID, which is complete insanity. The second that a cobra venom reaches air, it dies. The second it touches chlorine, it dies. The second it touches water, it dies. So it only took 1 second of listening to this guy. Plus, why was the guy smirking and laughing the whole time when he was talking about the basically a plan to murder everyone in the whole world? Because there's no discrimination. King cobra strike, one venom bite of a king cobra can kill 20 people within 20 minutes.
No. They said it was not actual venom. It's the synthetic version of it, which is just as ludicrous.
The synthetic version is what they've been using for 50 years for their vaccine research, for any type of pathogen research. But to associate snakes with COVID is somewhat true because there are viruses that arise out of snakes, which they did slice into the DNA of the synthetic virus. But to say that synthetic cobra venom can actually kill people in water system is equally absurd. So the man is, what is he? He's a chiropractor who works, his major thing is to work on acne. And what's his major real income? Selling water purification systems. So here's a man who says our water is poisoned, buy my water purification system. Now, the problem is that I was going to say old friend, Nick Stumphauser, is the one who actually got all of this rolling. He's the one who filmed it. And then later, Stu Peters interviews him and he tells the whole story. And he says that he's checked all the facts. Well, he didn't check any of the facts, obviously, because any facts connected with snake venom were incorrect in that presentation.
Let me point out something else, which is the most ludicrous thing about that story. And that has to do nothing with snake venom, but with public water. Now, I'm a civil engineer. I know this side of the business. And when you're talking about poisoning the water systems of America, that is one of the dumbest things you could possibly say, and is obviously said to put fear in people who don't understand how the water in our lives works. This water would dissipate any kind of poison put in the water. I mean, just take a look, for example, at the number of millions of gallons of chlorine that are put into our water supply. It would take an enormous amount of any kind of matter to actually cause the entire public to be infected by anything. The dilution effect of water is a magical thing. And you can poison water on a limited scale, but when you're talking about the scale of water supplies, you're talking about the kinds of things that occurred in Flint, Michigan, where they had all these old lead pipes in their system that were distributed throughout the city. Now, in that sense, yeah, you could get lead poisoning from that, but it would take that level of scale to have any effect with any of these snake venom stories. So this is intended to fool the American public.
Okay. So I wake up, I'm constantly scouring the news, but maybe what people don't know is I've been out in the internet for about 10 years watching, because I realized that the next warfare was going to be in the information space. And so I had to get to know who the enemy was. And I've been watching everybody coming and going. For example, that Ann Vandersteel, she's done a couple of shows with you, Mike, and I know
I
you've
like
had a
Ann.
and you like Ann and all that. So everything I have to say about Ann Vandershill is my opinion. But anyway, what happens is that within 24 hours, all these shills are pushing this story. And they're Stu Peters. Who is Stu Peters? He's a former rapper and a bounty hunter. You've got Alex Jones, and I know you like Alex Jones too, and you listen to him. And of course, he gives information that's good and truthful, but still, he's also pushing this within the same 24-hour period. And then, of course, we have Ann, and then we have Mike Adams. And so everybody's pushing the story. Really? We've been telling your story here at American Intelligence Media for about 7 years. I could be off. And not once have they picked up the phone to call you, the inventor of social media networking, to interview you and your researchers about all the amazing research. Why is that? Why is it when you go to Ann Vandershill's website and she has all of these guests that she's interviewed, if you look over the list, and here's the link where you can see for yourself, they're all your favorite. And when I say a shill, what is a shill? That is somebody who's deliberately standing in the way from you knowing truth. They either do it on purpose, they do it because they're stupid and they don't know how to research, or they're being paid by some people like what I've heard, Arnon Milchan and his group that keeps these alt media people out there. Now, over the last 10 years, I watch carefully who clusters with who. I know the different clusters in the internet, and I also know when a message is being pushed out because it will come from the cluster. So immediately, before I even heard Dr. Artis open up his mouth, I knew it was propaganda, because I saw where it's coming from. It would be like we're on the battlefield and I see a big tank roll in and it's going to shoot you. You're out in the field, and I call in and go, hey, you got to get out of the way, duck and cover. And you go, no. This is all good. It's good. But you don't know who the enemy is. You got to take my word for it. And so when I see these bullets coming out all at once, I know we're looking at propaganda. The other thing is that all of this was pushed out within 24 hours. Really?
Yeah,
You
that
haven't
was
been
to
on
me
anybody's show. Any of these people that I listed, except for Ann Vandershill.
Well, Ann did pick up the phone and call me, by the way.
Yes,
But
I know that. She did. But you know what? She also limits you. She has not done what you have instructed her to do through your research, that she needs to nail the Pilgrim Society. And if you look at her pages, all these low-level information people, let me just finish this off, and then I'll give you boys the floor. And then on top of it, now we have a large network. People don't know about the American Intelligence Network. We have what we call AIM-CATs, are all over the world. When they get truth information, they spread it out to their downlines. We can get the information out very, very quickly to our network. So within a few hours of this stupid story coming out, our people were already on it, looking at it. Then you have, I believe, this is my opinion, that whoever's running this operation gets a little worried that we're not pushing it out virally like they expected, and we are calling out the misinformation in it. So what do? They send in the producer and have him give cover, and that's Nick Stumphauser. And Nick Stumphauser has a little relationship with the three of us. He came and interviewed us with another filmmaker that we're not going to name right now, because Nick has come out publicly and he has said on the Stu Peters show, he's the one that produced this piece. He's the one that edited it, and he also checked the facts. Well, let me give you some facts about Nick Stumphauser. He is formerly a filmmaker with True News who interviewed Mike and Doug, who did an amazing discovery piece on Klaus Schwab and Anthony Fauci. And when Nick, that young man, was standing there listening, he heard all about Anthony Fauci and the Abyss family and all about the snakes. So he heard it. And then what did he do? Twist this story into this snake story? What is it? But I'll tell you this. Nick is young. He's just starting his film career. And I want to warn all of our AIM cats and anyone in the downline, if you ever see anything produced by Nick Stumphauser, you need to check it and double check it for propaganda. I'm finished for now.
Well, how do you really feel about it?
Well, the thing is that just people look and see who's pushing the message.
Yeah, that's the key. I think that my first tell was the fact that this just popped up overnight. And there was this new player, and he was extremely articulate, and he went on in so much exquisite detail that you get lost in his story. But what you do remember is snakes. You do remember that. And I don't know enough about virology, not virology, but what would that subject be? Don't know enough about that to know how snakes would or wouldn't be used. Since then, Douglas has educated me a lot, and I've heard other people talk about it. But the conflating of the subject of the public water supply and snake venom is where it went off the rails for me. I was done evaluating at that point. I knew this was a lie, and so it was intended to put fear in people. Folks, water systems dilute anything that goes in them. Now, when you're talking about an entire water system, it's very hard to make people sick without a lot of effort. And all of a sudden, how are you going to do that in an entire water supply across the United States, where every city has some source? You've got to go contaminate all those sources. It's just not going to happen.
Now, see, what's happening is you're swimming around in their lies and all their crapola, where we should be looking over and say, what is it that they don't want us to look at? If they're telling me watch the water, maybe I should look at the air. Douglas, what does that mean?
Good point.
Oh, well, first I want to make a few more remarks about Artis and his presentation. I think he's going to sell a lot of his water purifiers. That's really what that was.
Good.
Plus, I also believe that he was put up to this because, as Richard Fleming said when he was interviewed by good old Alex Jones, he said, basically, Dr. Artis doesn't know the definition of any of the words he used. And I would have to agree. As soon as he started throwing these things around, I thought, this man's insane. And is that why he's smirking? But anyway, I believe that it's just the same thing that Fauci did the other day when there were two books written against Fauci, both of them good, one of them by Kennedy and another one by another person who basically showed the history of Fauci and showed his criminal history with his family and pharmaceuticals, and to this day, and all of his patents, his contracts, his selling out to the pharmaceutical industry. And so I've looked at the books and looked at basically they're all over the internet. And then one day, this summary shows up on a book about Fauci, and I start reading it, and I'm going, wait, these are the most incredible facts I've ever heard. They started saying crazy things, which I repeated to you, and we're going, but you're saying, no, he didn't go there. He didn't go to that school. He couldn't have been a roommate with Bill Gates. And so pretty soon, the entire book became unraveled, and it was obviously written as a disinformation piece.
Mm-hmm.
So that now Fauci can say, just like Hillary always says, oh, no, that's been researched and it's been debunked 1,000 times. Watch my prediction. Soon Fauci will be addressing this, and he will be laughing at the idiots who believed the conspiracy theory that snake venom was really the cause of COVID. And then he will try to write off all other theories. Because in that, there was the content that was good was a little bit of content about remdesivir, showing the severity of how much of a killer it is. He didn't point out that Fauci invented remdesivir. He pointed out that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were helpful. Well, everybody knows that. There was nothing there that a common person couldn't have arrived at. There was no real inner secrets. And everything about the snake venom was all complete disinformation so that it could be what? Written off later by Fauci. So that's what I believe happened. And that happens all the time.
Because they don't want you to know about Fauci's snake background and the Abyss family and the family crest of the snake eating the child. This is what Nick Stumphauser heard when he listened to Mike and Douglas. Now, Rick Wiles used your images and your sentiments to raise what I have understood. Now, this is, for me, it's hearsay, around $1 million to put this production up. It's been almost 2 years. There's no production. But Rick, the coyote, we call him, he still has your money. Have you asked for it back? Have you demanded from Rick? Why haven't Michael and Douglas been presented? And where are you, Nick? You run away and you run with another enemy to push more propaganda on us, but you hold back the truth, the real truth of Fauci and the snake. And again, that's what they want us to look at. So don't look at the air. It's the 5G. They're getting ready to turn this up. And then all of you people, especially the schools that were outfitted with the 5G, will come down with this symptom that, please, Douglas, get into this. Who is the doctor that, or the NIH guy that said, what's the next big thing that's rolling out?
Oh, James Redfield.
Yes.
Recently, you put up on Gab the conversation I had seen him having on television, and now it's all over the place. And Betsy and her team found it and put it up. Listen to that. What he says is very clear. Get ready. And I say his name is Redfield because the fields are red with the blood that this man has drawn. He is a murderer. He's a killer. He knows exactly what he's doing, just like Fauci and Bricks and Dr. Barrick and Dr. Xing Li, and all of them. And by the way, 5 or 6 of the shills that are on the picture that Betsy's talking about, that Tyla's talking about, of people that have been interviewed by shills, those people are the worst of all. For instance, the number one person out there talking about COVID supposedly busting it is a man who helped invent it. He was the number one inventor in America, and he lies. He says he invented it worldwide. He did not. Messenger RNA. And yes, he was right there. And when they kicked him out, what happened? He became bitter. You know how many of these doctors who are now supposedly COVID busters have literally been in jail?
I'm not going to be able to get you onto the subject of the air, am I not?
No, I'm going to.
Okay, because Rudolf Steiner told us about this, apocalypse of the air.
Yes. Well, the apocalypse of the air is because the last apocalypse was water. Now, why did Atlantis supposedly go down? And before that, it was the apocalypse of fire during Lemuria. So why did Atlantis go down? If we're going to speculate here and get into the other side of the bridge, as I call it, my other work, it's very clear. Why did Atlantis sink? Because they crossbred humans with animals. That's what all the psychics say. And when you look at this, then what do you see as the remnant of that? You see satyrs, you see Pan, you see centaurs, you see all these beings who are half man, half animal, and they're talking as if they are real beings. Well, they are now, because we have crossbred humans with mice, humans with moles, humans with cows, humans with pigs. We actually have a human mouse now, and we all in St. Louis University and at their medical center there, they've been cloning humans for years, but they cloned them outside of the human body and then used them as the protein to do research on. So when we're talking about the apocalypse of the water from Atlantis, the new apocalypse is in the air. Well, what is the air? The air is 5G. The air is the poison electromagnetic frequencies that no one can stop, rich or poor, worldwide. And now, because of the 17,000 satellites that are going to be in space owned by Elon Musk, this madman that we were going to talk about in a while, there's no such thing as a place on the earth where you aren't getting thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of electromagnetic frequencies beamed through your body. 5G cooks you from the inside out. What's in the air? The chemtrails. What else is in the air? They now show that they've been dropping graphene oxide, graphene dioxide on us for years, as well as the other poisonous aluminums and thromium, all these different substances. Go take a sample of water from anywhere in America. This isn't a conspiracy. The problem is, for me, that as we know that this is coming, it's the radio waves, it's the airwaves, it's media, it's communication, it's radio, it's television, it's your computer.
But look at the snakes.
Well, the snake, look at the new
and
building
here's the other distraction.
Pope meets everybody in a building that looks like a snake,
yes.
And the picture of Christ is a snake.
Yes.
I mean, the crucifix behind him is a snake, okay?
And then so that distraction fell flat. A lot of people don't buy it. So then here we go. Elon Musk wants to buy Twitter.
Well, that could relate to these satellites, these 5G satellites. That does relate to these 5G satellites. And yeah, we see all this new energy and all these new stories. And I'm going to make a joke here. People are all on Twitter about all of these news stories. They're fascinated by it. Where we've just debunked the, I'm not going to use that word, I hate it. We've just shown how the water systems would completely engulf any kind of snake venom. So that's a story meant kind of like the melting of the ice caps, raising the water level in the oceans. That would not happen, folks. Put cubes of ice in a glass and watch them melt. Does the level go up or down? It goes down when ice melts, because ice is a greater volume than water. So you're not going to have the melting of the ice caps making the water go up. It just won't happen. No, that's engineering. I'm sorry, I'm so practical here. But with Elon Musk, this is an obvious diversion, because a lot of people have asked me, is he having a change of heart? Has he, become a Christian and whatever? And I can tell you, as a matter of fact, that Elon is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Elon has been with this whole modern development of the technology cabal from the early 1990s onward. And we ran into him when he was a member of what's loosely called the PayPal Mafia. And that PayPal Mafia is the group of people that were surrounding Mark Zuckerberg when he was sent to Harvard, and they started feeding him cash as they were taking our technology and eventually commercializing it in 2004. Elon was there with Peter Thiel, with James Breyer, with Reid Hoffman, Dustin Moskowitz, all those people. Elon was right there. He was in and out of PayPal, and it looks like they were kind of thrashing around to try to figure out where to put him. And he eventually started receiving all these magnificent billions of dollars from Obama to do the energy stimulus, to start SpaceX, to start Tesla. And he's not a genius. He's another one of these cardboard cutouts that we've been talking about. So when you see him come into the news now, and he's going to be the great savior of Twitter and allow patriots come back on the Twitter sphere, it's gotten everybody excited. But here again, these people know how to read the tea leaves on the internet and pick up keywords and things that honest people, patriots, are interested in knowing about, and then they make up stories that will get them distracted in order to start the little eddy moving over here while they're over here doing something completely different. And that's what we've got to realize with these people. Everything they say is a lie. And therefore, whatever they're saying, we need to think the opposite. And yet, every time one of these news stories come out, everybody gets all excited. When are we going to learn?
I'm reading reports today where everybody's saying Elon Musk, the champion of free speech. No, the champion of unmeasured speech, the champion of grotesque speech. This man has never said anything intelligent. And when he starts speaking, listen to anything he's ever said. He didn't invent anything. So him supposedly taking over Twitter, well, first off, there's no free speech on Twitter. So the whole myth that this is something good because he's going to raise his shares up until he has the controlling shares, but now BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street are saying they're going to buy equal amount of shares. So they did that thing. What's it called? You probably know it, the kill pill or the ill pill, or where they allow all the shareholders to now buy stock at a reduced price, which actually,
Or the
creates
poison pill. The
poison
poison
pill.
pill.
Yeah. And so that's
Yeah.
what they're doing. What does that do? That makes more money for everyone involved. Now, what is
Exactly.
that
So
about?
here's what's really going on at Twitter. What they're trying to do is create a market opportunity, I think, because there are shareholders at Twitter at the senior level who want to cash out their options in Twitter. They've got to figure out some way of making a market event that will drive the price of Twitter up so all these people can cash in their options and then they can move along to the next story. And so with Vanguard moving in, according to the story today, that creates a nice little controversy that everybody will say in confusion, there's profit. And so that's what's going on here. It's always happened. I mean, look at the way they broke up AT&T. They created all these baby bells. All that was so that the AT&T insider executives could cash out all their options in a market opportunity as people started funding the baby bells. And then what happened after they all cashed, those baby bells had to cash their options out so that they create another opportunity by merging it back into AT&T. I mean, it's so obvious.
Okay, and in all of this that's going on, we have Andrew Torba on Gab also saying, "Hey, Musk, look at me, look at Gab over here. We could use an infusion. And by the way, we could use those satellites too, because we see the problem coming down the way are these ISP addresses being taken down. Now,
Not related.
well,
Those
no,
aren't related
wait,
topics.
just a second. The fact that he knows about ISP addresses and all of this, he certainly should be, and his team, knowledgeable about social media networking, especially about how it started and whose invention it is. And what we keep asking Andrew Torba on Gab, and we love Gab, but Andrew, you say you're a Christian man. Why are you ripping off Michael McKibben and Leader Technology by
Right.
parking your platform and paying you, Michael and Leader, nothing for it?
Yep.
That's theft. Andrew Torba needs to answer to this, and don't tell me he doesn't know. He puts himself out there as a guru of sorts in social media networking.
Yeah, he does.
Well, I quite agree there, Betsy, because Andrew wrote a letter, and in it he was trying to quell the dissent among his participants on his Gab site. And he literally said, I should have read it to you, Michael, that he doesn't use the same foundation or any of the same substructure or anything that those evil sites use. He built it all from the ground up himself. How big of a lie is that?
Total lie.
So
I mean, I don't care how he wrote it. As soon as he uses our invention, he's infringing our patent.
Yes, he is. And so is he lying on purpose, or is he not knowledgeable? What is it? He needs to answer to this.
Well, if he's a good engineer and a good researcher, the first thing you do when you develop anything is you make sure you don't have any intellectual property encumbrances on the thing that you're building. And if you do, you go cut a license deal with that person before you go forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore he is either extremely dumb, extremely sloppy, or he knows.
And don't say it's because he's not knowledgeable, because many years ago, when I was still a teacher, I was developing a social media site just to be used in the school business. And we got to the point into the development where I asked the question, but whose platform are we parking this on? Oh, that's IBM. IBM lets anybody have it for free. I go, get out of here. IBM doesn't let anybody have anything for free. And then, now remember, this is before I knew these guys here, folks. I didn't know Michael and I didn't know Douglas, but I knew enough as a school teacher to know that I had to properly license this thing from the foundation to the point that I was using it. I couldn't find the foundation. That probably inspired me later to go find you, Michael, back in 2017, to find out who is really behind the platform that everything is parked on. And what folks might not realize, that it's not just social media platforms. If you log on to your computer at all with a password, the way you have described it, Mike, that's your invention.
In any social environment where more than one people can come onto a profile, yes.
How about a bank? If a bank used your stuff, same thing. So they're ripping you off. Everybody's ripping you off. But what really makes it egregious is Andrew Torba says that he's a Christian and he's a man of morals, and he is parking his platform and not paying his license fees.
Well, he and anyone else of these cardboard cutouts who are really DARPA stooges, anyone in the business getting started, creating something new would have to do what you just said, and they would find, exactly as Tyla just said,
Right.
an idiot would know that it isn't true that IBM Eclipse Foundation gave the world social media for free. Anyone would know that. And so I want to go back to Don the Con. Don the Con gathered up 6,000 affidavits that were sworn and signed with all the evidence showing how these media platforms were in fact squelching free speech, as well as, if you're a conservative, which is, so many of them. Well, I'm not going to get into that whole debate of which laws actually protect them, and we've gone over this so many times. But the point is that when Don the Con started this, he had 6,000 good names of people who had been kicked off, who had been demonetized, who had kicked off YouTube, who had been kicked off Twitter, who had been doxxed, who had been completely harassed, and their income had been taken from them. And what did he do with it? Nothing. There were 60,000 actually letters that were given to Trump. So 66,000 pieces of evidence. What did Trump do? He said he was going to take care of it while he was the president. He was going to stop this. He was kicked off Twitter himself. Well, what did you do? He did nothing. He hired Devin Nunes to manage an app to get onto Truth Social, what it's called, Truth Social. And nobody's going there, and it isn't anything. And that was the attempt at supposedly our hero of the Second American Revolution, Don the Con, leading us into free speech so that we could work through him, so we'd have a platform. That is nothing more than his presidential platform that he hoped would draw people to it. And
by the way,
is he lied.
They raised $1 billion to do that.
As I pointed out, that it was very obvious he will make way more than $1 billion, even if it's a 100% failure. The estimates are he'll make $4.5 billion off of this, even if it's a total failure. Now, I don't know how that happens, but that's what was being said all over the place when they analyzed his business deal and what he was doing with his site.
I want to go forward. I want to talk about Anna von Reitz, but before I get there, I just want to remind folks, when you see stuff like this come out, check all the channels it's on, because that Watch the Water, it was already on Hulu, it was on Amazon Movies. Oh, come on. They don't let any free speech truthers on any of these channels. So they have an agenda and they're trying to push it. I have always been very cautious of Anna von Reitz. Remember, now I'm keeping an eye on the internet. I'm watching the characters to see what they're pushing. And there's nothing that she says to me that really resonates. So I've always pushed her off. But as of late, she has raised her head. He, whatever it is, if you notice, there's only one or two pictures of this thing called Anna von Reitz. Again, that's not Michael McKibben's sentiments. This is my sentiments about her.
I don't follow her at all.
know you don't follow her at all, but I want to make sure the audience knows that so that they don't call you up and harass you about this. Is Tyla's opinion. Okay, but now I get her gig, because the researchers did some amazing pieces when Ketanji Brown Jackson was being grilled for Supreme Court justice, to find out the background of her husband on something called the Boston Brahmins. So we wrote a lot about that. You can find that at aimfortruth.org. You can also find it on Michael's site. And right here is his address. Now, Anna von Reitz did a post and she referred to our material. Douglas, take it away.
Well, she actually posts a URL to connect to something that Michael, you and I were talking about, the Boston Brahmins. And she basically said, well, look here, boys, and she refers to us as the boys a couple times, that the boys got it wrong, because basically, essentially, the bottom line is, I'm a Boston Brahmin. And some of us are good. Some of us are bad, but some of us are good. And she didn't give any justification for anything she said, except that she literally said that she is a blood lineage higher elite of Boston, and that her family goes back to the original Pilgrims, and that in fact they're good people, and that what we said is quite wrong. And she didn't give any facts to substantiate anything. I think you might have had. Did you find time to read what she wrote? It was just a simple.
I did. I read the comment.
Yeah. So Anna von Rees always talks about things that she says she's the only person who knows about because she's been in the international economic circles that understand where the real debt is being held,
Mm,
or that America's a corporation, or that, and this whole thing of American corporation. Well, guess what? We have found out that there was a debate between the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the British monarchy about whether or not that corporation was independent of the monarchy. And
right.
it looks like in the end, they certainly believed that they were, and they stood against the charter that was written for them, and they're a corporation. So therefore, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, where she supposedly comes from in her blood lineage, those were the corporatists who took over America, perhaps. And that might be why she always talks about the fact that we have to end these separate corporations for the states, the separate corporation for the Fed, and get rid of all this debt that is being held above our heads, and so on and so forth. But basically, I've never been able to follow through on anything she said. I might write it down, I look it up, and it's like, no, that's not even
Okay. But
real.
she's pretty much says she's a Brahmin, and they're good Brahmins.
Okay, well, let me just comment on the comment she made, and there's a very simple way to evaluate what she said besides what you said, Douglas, and that is, she didn't even address the main point of our article. We weren't criticizing all Brahmins for all time. What we pointed out that one specific Brahmin, and I don't remember his name at the moment, was the main slave shipper that used opium as a currency for decades in his business in Boston to ship British opium from Turkey to China and force the Chinese to buy it. That's what we were talking about. That's clearly sinful, clearly illegal, clearly immoral. And she didn't address it. She
And
just said, we're not all bad. What does that
and
mean?
and they became the most powerful bank in Boston. Later, they became State Street, who
Yeah,
right now still owns probably 1/4 of America, because Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, which is Boston, and T. Rowe Price, which is Baltimore, which is Washington, D.C. Those four companies, as a matter of fact, they said Twitter couldn't be leveraged by Elon Musk this way because those three companies are own as much as he does, and all they'll do is buy the same stock that he might buy, diffuse the whole thing. They'll all make a ton of money. The tide will raise all the boats, and
right.
it's just it's a scam. But what happened to the fact that 40% of the people on Facebook left Facebook overnight?
It
Nothing.
doesn't matter. Facebook is a money laundering operation.
Did,
It's
did
not
it?
about
Did it?
subscriptions.
But did it affect the stock? Oh no! What happened?
No.
When these cardboard cutouts, their companies go down, they go up, they buy into other companies like Peter Thiel going from what did he go to after he was there?
He was
Palantir,
Palantir.
Palantir, and what are these? These are supported. These are DARPA companies. Those
Right.
people didn't invent anything, and they get the same venture capitalists to back them. They get the inside group to come in early on. It goes up just like Trump's Truth Social. Truth Social is nothing more than, as you pointed out, it's
It's a
basically
grifting opportunity
it's a
for Trump.
grifting. It's
Just
kind of
like
like money laundering.
like Rick Wiles and his grifting opportunity, he grifted off of you two. Now, Michael, I know I'm going to get this question. Might as well just ask you for clarification. Please explain the pecking order between the Boston Brahmins and the Pilgrim Society.
The Boston Brahmins were much earlier than the Pilgrims. The original British immigration to America is what we're talking about with the Boston Brahmins, because that goes back to the 1620s when there were a lot of business deals going on in London to buy little sections of what was then New England all the way down to Virginia, and to settle the New World. And everyone was speculating on what the business opportunities were. So the Boston Brahmins came out of that group. So it was much earlier than the Pilgrims. But what we see is a lot of British aristocrats either funding or actually coming over to set up business deals. And Boston was an early location for that. And it was also a useful shipping port for ships coming out of London, out of Bristol, out of Liverpool, and it was a trading hub. And so it was out of that milieu that the Perkins family started shipping to various parts of Europe, and then eventually, so they started cutting deals in Smyrna, Turkey, and then they went to the next step, and they actually used British funding from the Barings and the Rothschilds to buy up the harvest rights for opium poppies in Turkey. And at one point, according to the histories, they had owned 2/3 of all the rights to poppies coming out of Turkey that were then shipped by their ships.
Turkey? That makes
Turkey.
me think of Mehmet Oz that Trump just endorsed. He was in the Turkish army.
Well, Turkey has been a favorite of the British going way back, much longer ago than we even want to talk about right now. But in the end, that opium was shipped to China, and the British fought 2 opium wars to make sure that the Chinese would not stop buying their Turkish opium. And 2/3 of that was shipped by these Brahmins out of Boston to cause that to happen. And it got so bad he couldn't carry enough money back and forth in gold or silver. So he actually devised a system where he could take opium credits, and then he had to create a bank in Boston called the Suffolk Bank that would then become an exchange for those opium credits into other forms of cash. And that became it was 80 years before the Federal Reserve was developed. So it was one of the early clearinghouse banks in the United States, was in Boston, developed by certain Boston Brahmins. Now, she's right. Was it all of them? Probably not. But the fact is, the sin is there. The misconduct is there. Misconduct is there. And then the third thing is,
well, then if she's a good one, why isn't she reporting on the real truth of the Brahmins?
Well,
making
right.
a statement that says she's a good one and the other ones are bad ones, that just doesn't cut it with Miss Betsy. No.
Well, most of the financing in Boston, it's well known from looking at these figures, came from that opium trade.
Mhm.
So everyone benefited in Boston that was in this Brahmin insider group. So I have a hard time believing there are any good Brahmins. They're all the beneficiaries of abject sin and immorality that came out of that opium trafficking.
Yeah, she starts off her article saying, "Oh no, they were Tories. Oh, this political party."
Well,
that
those are
political-"
all true.
No, here's what it is. They were members of a corporation called the Levant
Right.
Company, which was a merging of the Turkey Company and the Venice Company. And what did those companies all do? They did the same thing that was happening with the British East India Company, which we've talked about many, many times, and the Dutch East India Company. And then there was also the Dutch West India Company that had come to New York, and at that time called New Amsterdam. And basically, these were corporations that were pirates on the sea, and they were merchants who traded with a sword, and they were as corrupt as they could be. And when they found out that opium could literally be used as a currency, it never stopped. The
Right.
British couldn't even be forced out of China with 2 opium wars. At the end of the Second Opium War, the British said, "Yeah, you defeated us, so what? We're not stopping." So then they created Shanghai and Hong Kong, and basically to this very day, they still control those zones, and that's why you see such insanity there.
I found the quote. You want me to read that now?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if it shows up here. Okay, this is from Sun's War. He says, "Viral vector, I heard that described perfectly to me in an audio from AIM. If I'm remembering correctly, right, you were presented with the AIDS HIV problem and challenged your Waldorf class to learn everything about AIDS HIV possible. That was like 2 years ago that audio came out, and I remembered the specific words. Animal viruses cannot pass from the animal kingdom to human unless the DNA has been modified."
That is correct. Now, I want to just correct one thing. This is wonderful. This person said this and that they paid attention. And my point is, in March of 2020, I was saying the same things I'm saying today. And why? Because I'm not like the Shills who don't do any research before I interview someone. How stupid could you be to allow someone to come on your show and you didn't do one speck of research on the thing that person is going to then try to convince your audience of? That's not someone I want to listen to. So this person, I want to correct one thing. I was a Waldorf teacher at the time, and I was teaching at Wayne State University as a professor, and but I was also going to school there to get my another PhD. And so the second person in charge of the federal government's health department, came to our class, which was a terminal PhD class, and because we were all administrators already, asked us to create the policy for AIDS, HIV, in schools across America. So then they trained us on secret information so that we would be aware of it, so we could create a policy that we wanted, to be able to save lives. So I got informed early on what was really going on with AIDS.
Douglas, why was it secret?
What?
You said secret. They trained you on secret information. Why would it be secret?
Because they created AIDS and they distributed through smallpox and hepatitis B shots throughout the world. And who created it? The NIH. That would be literally Fauci and Birx created AIDS. The CDC and NIH created it. Jonas Salk discovered it accidentally when he was working on polio, and he created a thing called simian virus, many simian viruses, hundreds of them. And that's the reason they tried to blame AIDS on green monkeys, and that gay guys had a lot of green monkeys around them, and that's what caused AIDS. That's a lie. That's exactly like what the point of why I had that put on the screen, so that you could understand this very important point. And once you understand this, then a lot of the nonsense just goes to the wayside, okay? First off, AIDS is a synthetic created virus, and it was compounded through gain of function, and it was accidentally discovered by Jonas Salk. And then they used Zaire as their proving grounds for what? For HIV, AIDS, for Ebola, for all kinds of flus. They literally disseminate these into Africa to see what will happen. And then the British said, oh, that's such a good idea, that Perbide Institute, Murrell Institute, and Kinetic said, we will release the Wuhan virus in Wuhan.
Question,
Okay?
why Africa?
Why Africa? Because there's lack of communication there. People don't know. It doesn't get out into the media so easily. And it was their experimental ground. Look at what Gates said. He could, through his new green program, Greening of Africa, he said, will wipe out 17% of the population of Africa. And he was very proud of that. They're depopulating, but at the same time, they're experimenting. So
you're saying this was essentially a racist decision?
Oh, 100% racist.
It wasn't because the blacks have certain genetic codes that make testing more useful?
No. And also, where was the first 5G propagation and broadcasting to? Africa. There's nothing 5G in Africa. Why would Elon Musk do that? Why would he beam down the first
because it's in the air. The next big push is going to be coming from 5G, but they got to give it a name so not everybody's too frightened and wigged out about it. And they're going to say it's some new flu thing that's come out, Marburg or whatever Redfield is saying. Yeah, and that's it.
Virus.
Even other folks on the internet are talking about this.
My whole point that I'm trying to make here, which I'm going to make again, to correct that. I wasn't working with Waldorf students or Waldorf teachers. I was working at Wayne State University. But the rest of what you said is correct. Zoonotic transmission or transfection from an animal to a human has never happened in history and never will. Now, can we do it through synthetic manipulation and splicing of DNA? Oh, yeah. We have Dr. Shi Jing Li in the Wuhan lab since 1998, but since 2000 was the hero of Scientific America. Everything she printed was all about her synthetic virus that she created. And it was created years ago, and it was funded by the NIH. And so this whole thing about these bioweapon labs all over the world, especially in the 44 of them in Ukraine, we told you that a long, long time ago, because you simply look at who the NIH pays. They pay every one of our enemies to collect, yes, snake venom, yes, poisons, yes, any viruses, any bacteria, any illness that they can get that is sent back to the NIH will be compounded. It will have a gain of function and turned into a weapon under the auspices of medical countermeasures.
This is how the British wage war. They just get out their little death boxes, go in and find some kind of illness and then spread it around the world. And your researchers, Michael, uncovered this a long time ago about the wee little death boxes that were used in Africa.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned, you asked me about the difference between the Brahmins and the Pilgrims. Well, the Pilgrims occurred later. When the Cecil Rhodes and the Fabians and a lot of those socialist groups in England were trying to figure out a new way to organize the British Empire. And so they had a lot of this banking debt slavery already worked out. So what they were trying to do was figure out a way to roll this out across the world. And in 1902, they formed the Pilgrim Society with the specific intent of making sure that the entire world would be controlled by Britain and that everyone else would be socialist or communist in order to control them. And part of that 1902 to 1910 time was we saw Henry Wellcome, an American, go over to England. He became a knight, and he was specifically funded by the Rothschilds, to send emissaries out all over the planet to collect poisons, viruses, reports, any herbs, anything related to cures and poisons. And so in 1909, when they had the first Imperial Press Conference, he published a special book that advertised this death box you're talking about, where he encouraged these newspapermen to go back out into the empire and start using these vaccines and these poisons on the public. And then he specifically asked them to report those results back to him. And he sent them back to London to the Pirbright Institute and to Henry de Worms or his heirs and successors as they began developing this new strategy for doing bio warfare and electronic warfare against the world public. And that hasn't stopped because they started Marconi Wireless, they started RCA, which became NBC, and now we have this fusion between biotech and 5G.
And I remember that day that we discovered it. We were looking at Google Maps, and we were looking at the Pirbright Institute, and we kept seeing these circles in the landscape. And then we look down and we see Cobbett Hill. Is it Cobbett Hill Earth
Cobbett
Station?
Hill Station, yes.
And then we go, wait a minute. Is there a relationship between this 5G and the coronavirus stuff that's coming out? Sure enough, bingo, bango, it is. But we also saw in history that anytime this new electronic technology is rolled out, people will have symptoms that are flu-like, coronavirus-like. And so now when you have 5G and you can turn it up, and remember, when we were all on lockdown, they were putting these things up on government schools for children. They're going to take out our children. Folks, you shouldn't have your kids in these public schools anyway, because they're indoctrination centers. Get them out, because the next strike is going to be your kids.
Yeah, these pilgrims are really the pharmaceutical pirates who are murderers are pilgrims. And Lord Pirbright and Pirbright Institute and Muriel and Kinetic, all pilgrims. The pharmaceutical companies, all pilgrims. The people who are the largest philanthropists in the world giving money to pharmaceutical companies, all pilgrims. The head of the CDC, the NIH, all of them, all pilgrims. And what are they doing? Overpopulation is what they believe, and they want to kill, whether it's through 5G, through technology. They believe that radio waves would kill, and that they'd be able to kill many, many, many. And it does. And yet, unless you read certain books, you won't find out that one of the number one illnesses in America is electromagnetic frequency illness. And then to go back to what I was saying before about, and I want to make this perfectly clear, because Shanghai right now, there's a lot to say about it, but there's 25 million people locked down who are all going to be killed, because in Wuhan, when the first people, and now they know across the world because they did a study, and they found that the virus started exactly as I said, during the first days and the planning days for the World Military Games in Wuhan. And then 2 other times when there were massive amounts of people, they were all poisoned. They started locking those people up days after it was released at the military games, and I'm believing in the water. And then there was a massive food dinner, the largest potluck dinner in the world. It was in the food. And then during that, 2 days later, there was a New Year's festival where they literally had helicopters flying over spraying aerosols on them. Okay. So what did they do? As soon as people got it, they locked them in these high rises, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, welded the doors shut, and all those people died. That's how China dealt with it to begin with. China did not create this. Xing Li, Dr. Crazy Bat Dr. Xing Li, she not only created it, the whole world thought it was great, and Fauci was paying for it and sending her new types of things that she could splice into this. So going back to the initial thing, people say that we have never sequenced the DNA for this particular virus. Well, that's incorrect. It was sequenced very shortly thereafter, because if you remember, the story was that two people at that lab would go eat at the wet market, and they would eat bat soup. Now, these are people doing research on the poisonous dormant viruses in horseshoe bats. Okay, they know that if they even let a tiny speck of this inside, they're going to die. But they went over and ate bat soup. Okay, and then they came back and they died. And that is the stuff that was sent to Shanghai to be examined to sequence it. And it was sequenced. And I've said this from the beginning, and I'm going to say it again. 6 gene proteins were found in that initial sequencing. Now, there's 20,000 components, 20 to 3 billion components, but they sequenced the first sections of it, and they sequenced the gene proteins. So they found 6 proteins, actually 5, and one of them, there's a 6th one. What are those? All of these, each of those adenoviruses, all coronaviruses, all tobacco viruses, all murine viruses, all of the worst viruses that there are that come from animals. But animals have never passed their viruses on to us. That's just a fact. There's no such thing. There is no such thing as zoonotic transmission of a virus from an animal to a human. Never happened, never will. But
Boris Johnson's pitching that like crazy right now.
They all do. And they also pitch that it's a bat. And here's the next point, and this is the most important point of all. The initial sequencing, which is 100% ignored by everybody but us, I guess. No one else seems to know that this ever happened. All you got to do is plug it in. It's still on the internet. Anyone can read it. Those 6 genes were proteins that held every virus known to mankind in them. So if you want to say that HIV was spliced in there, yeah, it was. And if you want to say anything, you want to say that snake viruses, yes. Mole viruses, yes. Mice viruses, yes. Pangolin viruses, yes. But those are viruses, and there are no such thing as viruses. But anyway, let's just call them viruses for now. And what was the determination of the doctors there? And that's the number 1 sequencing lab in the world, that those 5 protein genes were recombinant. In other words, man-made in a laboratory, synthetic, done on purpose to kill. Now, I don't know why no one else wants to address this, and why these shills out there, if they hear us because they use our stuff all the time, they talk about us all the time and say whatever they want, but they won't talk to somebody who's actually done a speck of research, because one speck of research should shut up most of the shills and shut up most of these fake people coming on, because the research is very clear. Science is very clear. BioNTech invented the applications of messenger RNA. Snake venom started the experiments in RNA because that's what snakes use. So to say that it all derived from snakes, one could say yes, but then you'd have to also say it all derived from adenoviruses, from murine viruses, from all those viruses, because they do experiments on all of them, as we've pointed out. And those are the biggest companies in the world. Wellcome Trust is still what, Mike? Isn't that the largest
Wellcome
foundation?
Fund is largest
Wellcome
foundation for pharmaceuticals, yeah.
In the world. Bill Gates,
number 2.
Even the Clintons and all the biggest groups all donate money to pharmaceutical companies. Why? Because they own stocks in it. They're killing us, and they're making a ton of money off of it.
Okay. We are recording this on Good Friday, not Michael's Good Friday, but our Good Friday. And since it is Good Friday, I brought a special item in to be pictured in the background. And for those of you who have followed us for a while, you know what that item is. This is the day that this spear, it is, how should I put it? Not claimed, but our research takes us back with this spear to the spear of Antioch, which has its own legend of where the spear came from the time that it pierced the side of Christ, for that blood to fall onto the earth, to rejuvenate the earth, to bring us back to our spiritual origins. and it's taken 2 millennia to get here. What's so devastating is how many people aren't here with us in this moment of truth.
So true. When the blood of Christ entered into the earth, it redeemed the earth and stopped the earth from entropy and turned it into ectropy. We went from a planet into a budding star. But now the battle reigns. The battle is raging in the etheric realm around the earth and in the etheric body of the human being. And that's a new crucifixion of Christ. So when people don't have spiritual thoughts and they die and they basically go nowhere because they didn't do anything to deserve any of the attention of the spiritual world after death, that's what Christ is fighting for right now. And that's what that spear represents to me, is the victory, not only of the physical world, but the victory in the etheric world. And when we're talking about all these things, almost all of these attacks on humans, whether it be from pharmaceutical, technical, technology, 5G, whatever, that is an attack on your etheric body. And so we find great solace in knowing that the research that demonstrated that the provenance of this spear could possibly be, and certainly is, the most likely and probably the only other one in the whole world that is a first century Magna Hasta with meteorite in it that has been tested by professionals, that goes back to the first century, that has not decayed into a pile of rust. So go explain that. And also the wood that it's on is from the 8th century. At the same time, you'd have to ask the question, why in the world would you have a first century Roman legionnaire's spearhead on an 8th century most rare piece of wood that is the heart of an ash tree that you can make a spear out of? They only did that in sacred cases, or when they were trying to replicate what the Greeks believed were the sacred spear of Peleus or the sacred spear of Achilles. So what is this thing? All I know, am I free to say this, guys? When
It's not a thing, it's a relic. It's a
when this thing,
relic.
I was very, very sick when it came, and
Yes.
bingo,
Yes,
I'm here now.
Right.
You were at death's door, and that spear came into your life, and you're sitting here talking to us.
And I didn't ask for it to come into my life. Matter of
No,
fact, I kept
that's
saying
one of
no,
the tests
no.
for the authenticity of a relic, is that there are healings, there are miracles that occur around the relic. Tyla mentioned that our Easter's next week. I'm Orthodox Christian, and used to be Methodist and Baptist, but I chose to become Orthodox years ago, a long time ago now. But you mentioned that the spear, the wood that is on, it was 7th century Douglas, not 8th century. That's one thing. It was. You're right. 8th century. I'm sorry. I keep 700s. Yes.
I'm a historian. My brain,
Yeah, you're right. 8th century, and my strong belief is that was attached to the original spear as a liturgical accommodation, so that it could be carried. Because of the way it's weighted and the way it's made, it's very clear that somebody very lovingly put that together so that it could be carried in a procession in the Orthodox Church back, presumably in the 700s, and then and it's continued to this day. But the original lance would have probably been longer. But that's not what this is. This is an item of peace, an item of love, not an item of warfare or death.
That's beautifully said, Michael. And yes, the research that we did on it was astounding. And who could have known? I had researched the Spear of Destiny, actually went to Austria and stood before the Spear of Maurice, and wondered whether it had been held by so many German rulers. And they held it sacred. And Charlemagne believed that he was unstoppable because he had the spear, that spear which his father had given him, which the Pope had given him. But a different spear. So these holy relics are an amazing thing. And the point is that on Good Friday, people unconsciously assassinate those in their environment that they don't like. I've seen this happen so many times. We go out to Easter break and a teacher gets fired ruthlessly, or someone gets fired. So we must be conscious of these things as they're happening, and to not just depend upon the past. We have to create new icons. And so we have renamed this spear, instead of the spear of Longinus, we have renamed it the spear of love, the spear of mercy.
Yes, and that's a very different message from an item of warfare, and that it's a fact. We know from the scriptures that Christ's side was pierced by the centurion, and so we also know that the early church very much um, revered any kind of item that was a part of the Passion. And so, when you talk about relics and the idea that there are certain kinds of vibrations on this earth that are eternal, one of those was surely the message of Christ and the blood he spilled to save all of us. And isn't it interesting that we're now talking about a type of vibration or energy that is being rained down upon us through 5G, and very much from the hand of Elon Musk, who has been paying for satellites to be sent up into orbit so that this 5G vibration or vibration can be created inside our bodies, in our very cells, that would cause a lot of these symptoms of viruses that we've been talking about, that is an evil vibration. And here, by contrast, I firmly believe that relic is still vibrating with the life of Christ, and is bringing healing to you, Douglas, and to my prayers to the whole world.
Well, yes, because when we found out, we did that a little experiment where you gargle with some grape juice or wine, and then you spit it out on a little white plate is best. You pour some alcohol in it, and you will see what appears to be graphene oxide assembling itself. And so we can only conclude that this more than likely is coming from the chemtrails. We did this early on. Well, with my research into radionics and vibrations, I realized that everybody's breathing this graphene oxide. And if I could take a vial of that and place it right at the tip of the spear, then it would reverse the spin of this evil and move it to good. And folks who work with radionics know how that works. So I keep the spear in a safe place, along with a little vial of all the graphene oxide that's been pouring out on us. We call it the Holy Lance of Love.